When France's sole nuclear-powered aircraft carrier faces off against China's 40 warships forming an iron wall, is this smoke-free maritime standoff a display of strength or a strategic retreat? Beneath the calm waters of the South China Sea in March 2025, tension simmered. The French Navy's Charles de Gaulle nuclear-powered aircraft carrier strike group, under the codename Clemenceau 25, entered this strategic choke point, accompanied by the Aquitaine-class frigates Lorraine, Alsace, Normandy, and the Jacques Chevalier-class replenishment ship. When French Defense Minister Lecoulny declared in Paris that the mission aimed to uphold freedom of navigation in international waters, he may not have anticipated that this fleet, embodying the glory of France, would soon face an unprecedented shock in the depths of the Pacific. This elite force, comprising 50% of the French Navy's main destroyers and 25% of its frigates, collided with China's meticulously constructed three-dimensional air defense network the moment it crossed the Luzon Strait. The radar screen of the Charles de Gaulle initially only displayed the signal point of the Type 054, a frigate. Yulin. French commanders could still calmly classify this 4,200-ton frigate as a routine escort surveillance unit. However, just 4 hours later, the alarm bells in the Operations Command Center suddenly shattered the calm. Over 30 new targets were converging from 3 directions in combat formation. As dawn pierced the sea fog, the lookouts sent back a trembling cry. God, the entire sea is filled with Chinese warships. What now faced the French Navy was the most spectacular non-combat standoff in modern naval history. 4 Type 055 destroyers, each with a full load displacement of 13,000 tons, had formed a diamond-shaped fire network 20 nautical miles from the aircraft carrier, with 112 vertical launch units housing YJ-21 hypersonic missiles, with a range of 1,500 kilometers. 12 Type 054 frigates acted like moving walls, blocking all escape routes. Underwater sonar detected active sonar pulses from at least 3 Type 093 attack submarines. What sends a chill down the spines of French forces is that, 120 nautical miles away from the formation, the Shandong aircraft carrier strike group is conducting takeoffs and landings of J-15 carrier-based fighters at a rate of 60 sorties per day. The cold glow reflected by the dark gray fighter jets on the deck converges into a deadly starry sky on the radar screens of early warning aircraft. This seemingly accidental encounter was, in fact, an inevitable footnote in the shifting balance of modern naval power. When Captain Pierre, the commander of the Charles de Gaulle, urgently reviewed intelligence reports, a set of brutal data confronted him. This nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, which had consumed France's 10-year budget, was limited by its K-15 reactor, originally designed for nuclear submarines, resulting in a maximum speed of 27 knots, a fatal gap compared to the Shandong's 31 knots. Even more embarrassing was the fact that France's pride and joy, the 24 Rafale M carrier-based fighters, saw their combat radius plummet to 700 kilometers when armed with 4 Mica missiles. In contrast, the Shandong's J-15T fighters, equipped with domestically produced WS-10H engines, could maintain a combat radius of 1,100 kilometers while carrying 4 PL-15 missiles. While France's aging E-2C early warning aircraft struggled to identify maritime targets, China's KJ-600 early warning aircraft had already transmitted the entire battlefield situation in real time to the command terminals of each warship via a data link. The technological gap was laid bare under the scorching sun of the South China Sea. French military efforts to salvage their dignity have repeatedly failed. When Rafale fighters took off to conduct reconnaissance and photography, 4 J-15T fighters immediately assumed advantageous attack positions, and the lock-on alerts from their onboard active phased array radars sounded sharply in the French pilots' helmets. The S-565 Black Panther helicopter deployed by the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier had just approached within 30 nautical miles of Zubi Reef when it was targeted by a laser warning system from a Type 055 destroyer, causing its onboard electronic systems to malfunction instantly. Guided by the long-range early warning radar on Yongtsing Island, the H-6K bomber fleet, armed with YJ-12 anti-ship missiles, synchronized their launch procedures with the Dongfeng Tu-1D ballistic missiles deployed on Hainan Island. These carrier killers, with a range of 1,500 to 2,500 kilometers, turned the entire sea area into an iron cage. The French Pacific Command later acknowledged in a classified report, the joint operational capabilities demonstrated by the Chinese military far exceeded expectations, with their kill chain closure speed 3 times faster than NATO standards. The colonial-era maritime symbol crumbled before modern naval power. The originally planned show of courage through the Taiwan Strait was urgently cancelled, replaced by a hasty retreat via the Ryukyu Islands. The French Naval Task Force spent less than 18 hours in the South China Sea, its trajectory zigzagging like a startled snake along the edge of the 9-dash line, while French Admiral F.R.A.N.O.I.S. boasted on a public channel that, "We are ready for battle." His Pacific commander Pan Ge secretly sent 3, avoid misjudgment, notices to the Southern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army via an encrypted hotline. This political spectacle, which cost €300 million, ultimately became a strategic laughingstock. The French newspaper Le Monde sarcastically remarked, "What was gained with half a navy was an empty welcome pier in Singapore port," and a ceremonial praise tweet from the Pentagon. Meanwhile, the Shandong aircraft carrier was entering Hong Kong's Victoria Harbour, with a giant banner reading, "National Security, Family Prosperity," on its deck standing out vividly against the fireworks, and the cheers of 30,000 citizens drowning out the distant roar of the carrier-based aircraft. History completes its cycle in the waves. The bloody memories of the 1884 Sino-French Battle of Mizzou have not yet faded, but the chessboard of the South China Sea has already been reset. As the Charles de Gaulle returned to port in the Indian Ocean, the French Senate's Defense Committee convened an emergency closed-door hearing. The classified assessment report concluded with a bitter verdict: China's naval regional denial capabilities in the South China Sea have achieved a generational advantage, and its integrated surveillance and strike network based on island outposts has caused the cost of any external intervention to grow exponentially. What shocked the West even more was that during this standoff, the Shandong aircraft carrier set a record of continuous operations for 9 days, averaging 57 takeoffs and landings per day, surpassing the support standards of the U.S. Navy's Ford-class aircraft carriers. Meanwhile, the Type 055 destroyer maintained radar silence throughout the standoff, relying solely on passive detection systems for target tracking. This technical confidence is more deterrent than the number of missiles. This 40-to-1 standoff did not fire a single shot, yet it reshaped the power balance in the Pacific. As the rusty propellers of the Charles de Gaulle came to a halt in Tulin Harbor, the dry docks of Dalian shipyard were simultaneously assembling the massive sections of 2 new aircraft carriers. The waves of the South China Sea remain as blue as ever, but the rumble of shifting maritime power is as unstoppable as an underwater current, as the phased array radar of the Type 055 destroyer silently rotates, as the tail hook of the J-15T fighter precisely catches the arresting cable, and as the coffee cup of a duty soldier at the radar station on Yongshu Reef ripples, a new era is breaking through the waves. Those who attempt to revive colonial dreams through gunboat diplomacy will eventually discover that the sovereignty of this azure domain is already etched into the sights of the steel guns wielded by the reef defenders, forged into the unyielding beams of the lighthouses on the islands and reefs, and rising with the heat waves from the aircraft carrier's deck to form an impassable crimson great wall above the clouds.